Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Do You Ever Wonder? My name is Mike Haltman. I will be your host for tonight. I'm also the CEO of Hallmark Abstract Service. And the purpose of Do You Ever Wonder was really to try and bring some value to people, whether it's actionable ideas, whether it's just some good food for thought, or whether it's somebody with an interesting story to tell. And not to plug next week, but next week we have somebody with a very interesting story to tell. In fact, about a combat veterans charity. But that's for next week. But some of the stories that we've brought to you are Gordon Firemark, how to podcast, Steve Noodleberg, how to sell, and Jay Samet, how to be an entrepreneur. So tonight we're going to touch on a subject that it was posed to me by a woman by the name of Alyssa Bicker. And it kind of was intriguing. And the subject was, has anything positive come out of COVID-19? And, the reality is that for many people, COVID-19 has been nothing but misery, whether it's death, whether it's business dislocation, family dislocation, anxiety. Speaking of the charity for next week, combat veterans at risk for suicide. There's nothing more isolating and lonely than being locked up in a room or a house dealing with COVID. But the good news in New York is that Governor Cuomo yesterday released us from many or most of the restrictions of COVID. But that said, there were some things that I saw that were very positive or good that came out of COVID-19. And before we speak to our guest, just to go through a few of them, one was family. I have older kids in their 20s and 30s, and I had the opportunity to have two of my kids living at home, which is not normal, is not the way things should be, but it's actually been fantastic. But that is one positive. Community, people walking around their neighborhoods, getting to know people that they've never known. They didn't know they lived in the neighborhood and never would have known they lived in the neighborhood if it wasn't for COVID. So a way to connect. And then philanthropy, just people helping people. The virtual world, we were just talking before we went on about Zoom. I knew nothing about Zoom. I didn't know Zoom even existed. And now Zoom has become an integral part of the way we live, do work, network, see people. It allowed us to connect with family that we may not have connected with before, but through the wonders of technology, we were able to do that. The power of the private sector was laid out there in terms of creating a vaccine for this horrendous virus. So, just in terms of some of the positives that have come out of it, there are some. Not to minimize anybody's tragedy, not to minimize the pain and suffering that so many people have gone through in so many different ways. But, there's a concept of the mind called, or a part of the mind called the amygdala, and it's the fight or flight mechanism. And COVID-19 has shown people that they have the ability to fight and the necessity to fight. Unfortunately, some of that fighting was about things as mundane as trying to find toilet paper and paper towels. But so many of us fought for things that were really important to us. So, those are just some of the things that I've seen that maybe are good. Maybe some good came out of this. But my guest tonight, when COVID hit, pretty much the entertainment industry shut down very quickly. And Glenn Allen is a special effects guru, I guess you would call it. He's worked with, why not? He's worked with some big names: Ron Howard, Brian De Palma, Martin Scorsese. He's worked on films like The Wolf of Wall Street, Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind. So all of that said, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And hopefully I didn't talk too much. But just really briefly, because I found it really fascinating. Can you just go? What is visual effects?
Sure. So just to give you a little background, I started out in editing and post-production. Like you mentioned, I was a freelancer for a long time, hooked up with Ron Howard for about 10 years. And in the mid-90s, film editing went digital. Everything went on the computer. So I started doing a lot of visual effects. So when we say visual effects, we mean digital effects and everything you can do on the computer, as opposed to special effects, which is smoke, explosions, practical things you would do on set. That's the difference. But yeah, so I got into that and started a business. We've been in business now 16 years. We've worked on, I don't know, 100 movies or so. And like you said, when this happened, we were in the middle of a job. And we kind of panicked at first. I shouldn't say we. I didn't panic. I just thought, we're going to get through this. I mean, people have to understand if we have a delay in delivering our visual effects. At the time, we were working on the trial of the Chicago 7 that's on Netflix. And they had finished shooting, and we had all this work, a stack of work to do. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and we had to leave. Our crew had to go home. So it was a little, we weren't sure what was going to happen, how we would work. And it turned out to be better than we ever imagined.
So why was it better? What were your thoughts? What were your strategies?
Well, the strategy was to, send every worker home. We had about 15 guys, so and women, and so we're known as a boutique shop. And we sent everybody home with a computer workstation and a hard drive with their material, and we did it through Dropbox. Believe it or not, people uploaded their work and they did their work at home. And I think one of the reasons it worked was that the crew had a lot of flexibility all of a sudden. They didn't have to commute. They were with their families. They could catch up on the weekends if they wanted to do something during the day, during the week. They didn't have a watchdog, so to speak, as long as they got the work done.
Well, so you went from I imagine, I've never been in Hollywood, but I imagine it's extremely rigid, extremely time sensitive. So you have deadlines, like when I worked on Wall Street, there were deadlines. So what would you say? So out of this, and I'm assuming that everyone in your family was fine, that they came out of this okay. That's fantastic. But what would you say was the number, besides work, and we'll get into that in a second, but what would you say were some of the positives that came from just not having to go to where it was that you had to go?
Well, there were a few. One of them that you touched on was my family all came home. I had 2 kids in college at the time, and we started having family dinners again, which hadn't happened in years.
Right.
Because everyone's working and everyone's at school, work, friends, and we started having these dinners every night. It was great. It was fantastic. Work-wise, the biggest thing for me was not having that daily commute. For 30 years, on and off, I commuted to the city every single day, unless I was on location for a month here or there. And I never realized how much freedom I had not having to sit in a car for 2.5 hours out of my day.
Well, I think you had said that on the trial of the Chicago 7, you were filming in Newark.
We filmed. Some of it was in Newark, some in Chicago. Yeah, some in New York. So we did that over the summer and fall of 2019. And then, but so the clients edit for a few months and then they turn the work over to us, and that's pretty much when the pandemic really hit,
Right.
and we had to send everybody home. We had a studio in Midtown at the time, and yeah, so those are a couple things that, like I told my business partner, I'll never go back to the city. I can't do the commute after not commuting for a year and working in my home office, which is very nice. Zoom is great. I can go outside. It's just
So
that 2.5 hours a day was tough.
do you think that because, in my business, I deal with real estate, and the Manhattan commercial real estate market is kind of a question mark right now. Will people commute? Will people be going back to the office full time? Will it be part time? What? So you're going to give up your office altogether?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah, we did. We held on to it for a little while, and our landlord let us out of our lease.
Right.
And
So
yeah,
so you're going to work from home,
yeah,
and the rest of the people who work for you are going to work from home,
right. We're fully remote.
which is, again, quality of life. So I think what COVID may have taught people is that there's more important things in life than the daily grind. That quality of life, quality of family, things that actually make you happy. Like I think a lot of people have realized that being on the hamster wheel isn't necessarily the way to do things, particularly when you come to the realization that life is precious and can, things can happen in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, and who knew? I mean, we didn't know there was another way to do this.
Right.
We never knew. And on Chicago 7, we performed better than expected. Our artists, they loved it. They loved not having the commute of their own, not spending money on expensive lunches in Midtown, and they got the work done. It was incredible. We finished the job before the deadline, which I would say hasn't happened in 16 years.
So now the actual acting part, was that able to be done? Or
the actual shooting of the movie, you mean?
Right.
Yeah, they shot the movie back in the fall of 2019.
Oh, so it was in the what do they call it? It was in the box.
It was in the can.
In the can, right?
In the can.
Right.
So they were in the editing process. So these days all editing is done on computers, so they could continue editing. Just the director and the editor, and a couple of assistant editors, they can keep going, which they did.
Right. Well, you had said that you were able to turn through the visual effects that you do. You were able to turn something that was just like a regular room into the actual courtroom.
Well, most of our work was exteriors because the movie takes place in 1969. So we had to make Newark look like Chicago, and we did a lot of work on the riot scenes.
So do you also do visual effects? Like sometimes I wonder when I'm watching something on TV from the 60s or 50s, and all of these actual cars from the era are on the road. Are those visual effects too?
Sometimes, yeah. Usually they'll have a certain number of period cars, and then with visual effects we'll fill in.
Fascinating. So everyone, the people who work for you, they dispersed, or does everyone kind of live in the area, but they just don't have to, they can stay home?
They mostly live in the area. We have people in Brooklyn, Queens, Jersey, Connecticut, and everyone just worked from home, and they really loved it. That was my biggest concern. I thought people would want to be
around other people.
Be around other people, but we were kind of, we had Zoom meetings all the time.
Right.
Constantly on the phone, connecting. And I think they really loved it. And when we took a poll afterwards, or maybe about 6 months in, when we were considering shutting down the office, every single person said, we love this. Please don't go back.
You know what? It's interesting in terms of different industries can do different things. You can work remote. I know law firms, not so much. A lot of banks and brokerages, not so much. It's it's hit industries and job types very differently.
Yeah, I look back now and I remember there'd be in our office we have the lights dimmed down a little bit so that everyone's huddled on their computers with their earphones most of the day. That's it. Everyone's in their own little world.
Right.
And
so they might as well do that at home.
It wasn't. Yeah. It really surprised me how efficient we were.
So you talk about some of these directors you've worked with. A soundstage in Hollywood, that's got to be a little bit of a different animal in terms of the ability to work from home, I would assume.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we work in post-production.
Right.
So when you're shooting a movie, obviously the crew has to be there. That's one of the reasons Hollywood shut down for so long. They had to figure out the safety protocols and the expense of that, because you can't shoot a movie with 50 people from their own homes. That's a very hands-on kind of thing.
Well, so I networked with a guy who was he was in lighting on the SVU series. So when COVID hit, that shut down. So he had to reinvent himself, and he did something very smart. He kind of consulted with people, because people like me are on Zoom. Your lighting stinks. Your background isn't exactly what it should be. Of course, now mine's perfect, but it's interesting how you can take different things and you can really pivot and you can really reinvent yourself. Luckily you don't have to do that, but it's a fascinating thing.
Well, I kind of did by chance. Along the way, with the visual effects business, I managed to I co-produced a show called The Men Who Built America for the History Channel. And I really loved producing. I wanted to do that ever since. And I produced short films and things. I'm producing a documentary right now. But I've always, tried to find, since that show for the History Channel, tried to find a way to do more of that and kind of transition out of visual effects into producing. And when COVID hit, I had that opportunity. I could never do it while I was doing the business. But when we shut down, we shut down for a good 8 months or so, where we did nothing. But people started contacting me about, could you direct this? Could you produce this? What about this document? Do you want to produce this? And I did. And it's been fantastic.
And
so
that's
opportunities.
That's going to continue into the future.
Yeah.
So for you, COVID allowed you to do what it was you always wanted to do, but never really had the opportunity to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I never had the time to really, I couldn't break away from my business to do something like that.
Right.
Unless we were involved in the visual effects like we were on Men Who Built America. That was a little different. But to be the executive producer of a show, it's all consuming. So
now the executive producer, if I understand, raises the money?
There's lots of different definitions for that. What I do would be, it's basically the executive producer is responsible for every dollar spent while fulfilling the vision of the director.
Right. Okay.
That's really the producer's job. That sometimes you see shows and there's 10 producers. Usually there's one guy who's actually producing the show, and you try to fulfill the director's vision, and you have to juggle the dollars to try to make that happen. And when you can, and then you put out fires creatively and financially. So
now all of the directors, and I guess some of these guys, Ron Howard's a producer as well.
Mm-hmm.
Those are people who who potentially can give you or help you or work with you or consult with you on projects?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've become friends with a man named Anthony Katagas. He won an Oscar for 12 Years a Slave. And I would consult with him, and we've done about 6 movies with him, I think. We've done the visual effects for his movies, and I always pick his brain about producing. And I've been involved in a lot of different departments in my career. I've been in camera, I've been in props, I've been in post-production, I've run the business. So
you pretty much know.
Well, producing, it's I hate to say it comes easy to me. I'm very comfortable in that role.
And directing?
Directing is a little bit of a different animal. I do like directing. I just directed a short film that's now in post-production. Again, because of COVID, I was approached by an actor. Something he had written, and I did that. Directing is really, you have to be all in every minute.
You got to be willing to push people around too, right?
Well,
that's what it, or maybe that's just what I see on TV.
Right. No, the director is you have to live and breathe the project every waking moment.
Right.
As a producer, I can set things up, like I said, fulfill the director's vision. And then once they're shooting, I can sit, observe, troubleshoot, but I can produce something else on the side at the same time.
But as a director, you have to have an incredibly creative mind, visualize. Like sometimes people go into a house they want to buy, and it's an old house, it needs work, and they can't visualize what it could become. And I would imagine a director has kind of the same empty palette with a movie or a project.
Yeah, it's very creative, but it's also a craft that you can learn.
Right. It's interesting. Well, I guess Ron Howard, he wasn't always a director producer. He was Howard. He was Richie Cunningham.
And he was Opie, and he was in The Music Man when he was 4. The thing about actors, I think a lot of them make great directors. Like Clint Eastwood's a good example. They've been on the movie set. They know how it works. They know how to get the most of that time, because time is time is money. And
oh boy,
there's a lot of pressure, and so I think the actors, and like Ron, he's been on movie sets his whole life. He's a great director. He knows exactly how it works and what he can get. He knows how to prioritize the day.
Right. Well, you see, he also seems, and I always look at people on TV, and he seems like he's a nice guy in person.
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
He's a fantastic guy and great family man. And yeah, I love Ron.
That's great. I mean, I told you, I think my own brush with celebrity when I had to go get the keys to an apartment I was subleasing from Donnie Most.
Yeah.
The original Ralph Mouth.
Ralph, yeah.
That was great.
From what I understand, him, Ron and Ralph, or not Ralph, Donnie and Ron, and Henry Winkler. Oh. They're all good friends, from what I understand. There's a lot about
you know what? They seem like they. I bet it's probably hard to do a show like that. If you don't like the people you're doing it with, I would imagine.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure. And one thing, as a producer, what I do is I try to make sure we have good people.
Right.
There's too much pressure that there's no time for.
You know what? It's all about surrounding yourself with good people. When I used to coach my sons and daughters' teams, I would always draft for good kids with good parents. Yeah. Life's too short to surround yourself with. Winning isn't everything, I guess, is the other thing.
Yeah, I believe in karma.
Absolutely.
I think chemistry is an underrated thing when it comes to sports or a movie set.
No question. So let me ask you a question in the couple of minutes we have left. Hollywood, Broadway, television, how do you see it coming back? How do you see it regenerating from the year or 15 months that they've basically been in hiatus?
I think it's going to evolve. I mean, Hollywood's almost back. They since people are being vaccinated, they figured out a way to do it so it doesn't cost a fortune. I think that's the safety protocols were very expensive. Some movies did it, like Jurassic World, and Tom Cruise did a movie, but it's very, very expensive to house a crew in a bubble for months.
Absolutely.
But I think that's coming back. Broadway, I hope, comes back, but I think that might take. I think that'll evolve.
Well, so they're talking about, I think, September,
Yeah.
full capacity of the theaters.
Yeah.
So I guess you would assume that people are comfortable and will be more comfortable. I guess some might wear masks, but
Right.
The good news is New York City is coming back, and hopefully the rest of the country is going to come back as well.
Yeah, I never doubted that, especially with streaming services like Netflix and everything. People being home, they are consuming these shows like you can't believe. I mean, there'll always be a need for storytelling.
Right. Yeah.
And,
well, it's all whatever you're doing, whether it's business, Hollywood, or music. It's all about storytelling.
I think that'll always be around, and hopefully we don't have to go through this again where it completely shuts down.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know that the citizenry would put up with a shutdown like that again.
Yeah, I think Hollywood would find a way to keep shooting.
Right.
Would be an extra expense, but they'll figure out a way.
Right. I mean, the scenario of shutting everything down is, I think people are going to have a hard time.
Yeah,
God forbid it ever happens.
Yeah, I agree.
But I got to tell you, Glenn, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for. It was your idea that you conveyed to Alyssa, I think.
We were talking one day, and just I was saying I feel guilty sometimes talking about the benefits of COVID because so many people suffered.
Right.
So I do it quietly, but yeah, I've seen a lot of opportunities have come my way because of it.
You know what? And there's nothing to be. I mean, that's just the way. That's the way life goes. But there's no downplaying the horrors of it all, the tragedies of it all. But I think it was worthwhile to say, whether it was that list I read of. Actually, I didn't read it. You shouldn't read. Whether it was the positive aspects, whether it's family or ways to change your business so you're not commuting 2 hours. Always good things can come out of. I think they call it green shoots. Green. Yeah. There's always a resurgence out of something that's horrific. And
exactly, it's like turning obstacles into opportunities.
Right.
And, I always look out for that kind of thing, and
that's fantastic. And I know going forward you're gonna knock them dead. And if in any of your documentaries you ever need a fledgling businessman who can pull off the black shirt on camera, please don't hesitate to ask.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
All right, man. You take care.
Okay. So long.
All right.